Your support helps us bring you programs you love. Go to wyomingpbs.org, click on Support, and become a sustaining member or an annual member. It's easy and secure. Thank you.
If you Google Frank Abagnale, you may see terms like con artist, check forger, or imposter. Or you might see the term security consultant. In cooperation with AARP Wyoming, Frank Abagnale visits Casper to give us hints on how to protect ourselves from fraud. You've seen his character in the movie Catch Me If You Can. Frank Abagnale, on the next Wyoming Chronicle.
Funding for this program was provided in part by the Wyoming Public Television Endowment and viewers like you.
Funding for Wyoming Chronicle is provided in part by the Dragisevich Foundation, supporting the work of the Wyoming Community Foundation.
And we're pleased on Wyoming Chronicle to be joined by Frank Abagnale. Frank, welcome to Wyoming Chronicle. Our viewers know you, I think, like many viewers across the country, many Americans, because of the movie and the fame that you've achieved from Catch Me If You Can, from a book you wrote that was turned into a movie, a Broadway play, a television series that talked about your early life as a forger, con artist, and really a criminal. But welcome to Wyoming Chronicle.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
You bet. You're here because you're assisting AARP Wyoming and AARP nationally to give good advice to people to protect themselves from fraud and from criminal imposters like you were at one time in your life. And we're going to get to many tips that you have for our viewers here in just a little bit.
Sure.
But before we begin, take us back, Frank, if you would, to the time when in your life when you were 16 years old. You need to you made some decisions that were family-based, and you were on your own, and you began a short life as a criminal.
Yeah, when I was 16 years old, my parents separated, and I found myself in a courtroom with my parents and the judge telling me that I had to decide which parent I was going to live with. And as a 16-year-old boy, I couldn't do that. I couldn't find a way to do that, so I ran out of the courtroom. And I ended up as a runaway in New York City. Back in the 60s, there were a lot of runaways, but a lot of them got caught up in the Haight-Ashbury, the hippie scene, the drug scene. And I realized real quick that the only way I'm going to survive is if people don't think I'm 16. They're going to have to believe I'm a lot older than that. So we had a driver's license at 16. Back then, they didn't have a photo on it. It was an IBM card. So I altered one digit of my date of birth. I was born in 1948, and I changed that 4 to a 3. And that made me 10 years older or 26 years old. And I started writing checks, which at first I had some money in my account. And I found it very easy for me to go in and write a check. And so when the money ran out, I kept writing those checks. And the checks started to bounce. Police started looking for me as a runaway. And I realized I have to leave New York City pretty quickly. And one day I happened to be walking up the street and saw an airline crew come out of a hotel. And I thought to myself, wow, you know, if I could get one of those uniforms, then I could go into the bank as a pilot and say that I'm out of town and I ran a little short on cash. Could I cash a check? And it would make it so much easier. Never thinking of anything else other than just that. Everything I did was at the moment, never premeditated.
No remorse at the time? No thinking of consequences?
You know, I always tell people who say, you know, you were brilliant, you were a genius. I was just a kid. And I think that was the success that I had being a kid, because I had no conscience. I had no thoughts of being caught. I think because I was so young, I didn't premeditate anything. So I didn't sit out in front of a bank with a $500 check and say, I'm going to go in and cash this check, so here's my plan. I'll say this, and if they say this, then I'll do this. If they do this, I'll do that. I just went in and did it. And I think that was all the fact of being an adolescent. I've always believed had I been a little older, had I started doing this at 21 or 25, I would have done half the things I did, because I would have rationalized that I'm going to get caught. It's not possible. It can't happen. I think because I was so young is why I had so much success doing some of the things I did.
I wondered, and we had talked just briefly earlier, had you been in a rural area when you were so young, say in Wyoming, that it might have been much more difficult for you to pull off the con jobs that you were successful in this big world of anonymity in a big city. Is that, do you agree with that?
I think it would be much more difficult. I think people are, though they're a little more trusting, they also know a little more about who's in town and who the people are that they're talking to. But I also feel that had I actually gone to a small town and ran away to a little town, I probably would have had someone come up and have some pity on me and say, hey, what are you doing here? How come you ran away? Maybe helped me out, maybe got back on the straight and narrow. So I might have been better off going to a small town, even though I wouldn't have been able to pull off what I did. I probably would have not gone down that road and kind of been in a small town other than New York City.
You were finally arrested in France.
Yes.
Did you play the policeman well in the movie who arrested the
Yes.
Leonardo DiCaprio character?
Yes, I was actually arrested by the French police on a Interpol warrant by the Swedish police. The Swedish police were looking me for forgery, but they believed I lived in France. So when the French police took me into custody, they realized I had forged checks all over France, so they refused to honor the extradition request and the warrant from Sweden. So they convicted me of forgery and sent me to French prison. So I served time in France. When my sentence was over, I was extradited
and you've
to
written
Sweden.
that was just an absolutely horrible experience for you.
Yeah. I have to say this, though. You know, I've been in the French prisons, the Swedish prisons, the American prisons. When I go to France now, I don't jaywalk. I don't double park. So the truth of the matter is the French believe that you go to prison to be punished. You don't go to prison to live better than people on the street who haven't broken the law. So they don't believe you live in an air conditioning and have money paid to you to work and watch television and have movies on the weekend and miniature golf and lift weights and do those kind of things. So I really believe of the three experiences, it's the one that left the most impact to not want to go back to prison. I don't think that in the American prison system, people go in there and live really quite well. So there's really not a thought about if I do this again, the worst that can happen is I'll just go back to that prison. Once you've been in France, you'll never want to go back to prison again. So I think in all they have a better system than we do.
You were finally incarcerated in America. You then got out early, so to speak, by committing to helping the FBI.
Served 4 of a 12-year sentence. And the government came to me and offered to take me out of prison on the condition I went to work with an agency of the government. And I would simply be being paroled to that agency. So I'd still have a parole officer. I would still be serving out my parole until the remainder of my sentence. And of course, I have to be honest, you know, I know people would love to hear me say I saw the light. You know, I was born again in prison. I was rehabilitated by the people in prison. I don't really feel that was the case. I came out of prison. I really didn't think I was a changed person. And once again, being the opportunist I was, I said, here's an opportunity to get out of prison. So of course I said yes. But then I went to work with the government and with the FBI. This is back in a time right after Hoover. Clarence Kelly was the director of the Bureau at the time. There was just white men, graduates from Yale and Harvard, lawyers and accountants. It took a long time to build credibility, to be accepted by them. But I realized very quickly that I was surrounded by the most family-loving, country-loving individuals that had tremendous ethics and character. So every day that kind of wore off on you. And I met my wife while I was on an undercover assignment. And I think getting married and having children and bringing children into the world, all those are the things that changed my life. I didn't come out a changed person. Being involved with those things is what changed my life.
And I want to talk more about your commitment to family in just a little bit. Tell me now if I have this sequence correct. To Tell the Truth, Today Show, Johnny Carson, your life changed.
Absolutely correct. I went on the Today Show. Nobody picked me. They picked the other two people.
To Tell the Truth.
On the Tell the Truth, I'm sorry. Then I was on the Today Show back with Tom Brokaw when he hosted that show. And I was on there around Christmas to talk about counterfeit money on behalf of the Secret Service. So he had up things behind me that showed counterfeit bills, and I was explaining how you detect a good bill from a bad bill. And towards the end of the interview, he just happened to say to me, now you work with the government, but you come to the government in a very unusual circumstances. So I said yes, and I explained them. Johnny Carson was watching back on the West Coast, and he said to NBC, send me that tape of that guy you had on the show. And they did. And so the next thing I get a call from the Tonight Show, and it was from Johnny's assistant, and she said to me, Johnny would consider having you on the show, but you first have to come out for an interview, and we don't pay to bring you out here. And I said, well, why would I go on Johnny Carson? They said, well, just to talk a little bit about your life and what you do today and how come you do what you do. And so I went out to there. I said to her, you know, I'm always out on the West Coast on business. Can I just come when I'm out there? She said yes. So I went out, did the interview. They invited me on the show. And I went out and I took my wife for the first time we went on the show. My wife was sitting in the green room. They told me I'd only be on for maybe 4 or 5 minutes. I was going to be followed by the Pointer Sisters, who were at the peak of their career. My wife was in the green room with the Pointer Sisters. They were all dressed in their gowns and ready to go. And I remember the man that pulls the curtain said to me, "This is your first time on the Tonight Show, right?" I said, "Yes." "Well, when I open this curtain and you step out here, this will change your life."
Did you believe him?
Forever. No. And I went on. Johnny Carson does not like to meet his guests beforehand. He wants everything to be very fresh. So I went out, met him for the first time. I was very comfortable with him, did a great interview. And after the few or 4 minutes, Dee Cordova, who was the producer, said, "Johnny, don't forget we have the Pointer Sisters after commercial. We need to bring them on." "Nope, I'm going to do the rest of the show with him." And I got to be on for the rest of the show. And then he invited me back, and I was on 9 times on the show.
Wow. I want to assure our viewers the Pointer Sisters are not in the green room. We're not preempting
No, right.
tonight. Frank, since your life has been, in my eyes, one of redemption, is that accurate?
Yes. You know, I know that people look at my life and they're very fascinated by all the things I did between 16 and 21. I recently turned 70, so I look back, of course, on my life. And what most amazes me is the fact that I did those things. I went to prison, served my time, paid my debt, lived in such an amazing country where you can get out and change your life if you want to, reconstruct your life. And I was able to get that second chance, which is amazing. And I've worked for the FBI for 42 years, for 4 decades. I've been married to my wife for over 40 years. I've brought 3 wonderful sons, of which one is an FBI agent, into the world. The things that have happened in my life is where I wake up every day and say, I cannot believe that these things have happened in my life since then. So I'm not amazed by what I did between 16 and 21, but I'm absolutely overwhelmed and amazed by what's happened to me from that point on in my life.
And that's really what's brought you to Wyoming today.
Yes.
Fraud is in our world. I've heard you say it's 4,000 times easier today because of technology for someone to do what you did 40 years ago or 50 years ago. Even in the world of technology where we have little radio chips in our cards and we have passwords and we have, you set a password and we get texted back and you have to confirm that and all those things. Fraud is still a big deal. And
right.
it's a big deal for older Americans.
Older Americans. And always remember that a lot of those technologies that make us feel good really don't work very well. So passwords are a 1964 technology. I believe they're for tree houses. They're not for getting into a computer. So that was developed when I was 16. And here today at 70, we're still using passwords. So we have to eliminate passwords. That's one of the real problems we have with technology today. And we're on the road to doing that. But yes, a lot of technology has made things a lot easier for the criminal who just simply uses the technology in their favor. And there's a lot of things that we have the ability to develop but can be replicated. So we have Russian gangs that bring in more than $20 billion a year, so they can replicate a chip. There are a lot of things that get very scary when it comes to technology because we have the ability now to shut someone's pacemaker off, but we have to be within 35 feet of them and pass them by on the sidewalk. We could assassinate them.
And you're worried about futuristic dark uses
of technology. The ability now to stop a vehicle, but we have to be within 35 feet of the vehicle. The vehicle has 240 computer components in an average new car. We can shut the motor off, turn the airbag on, lock the person in the car. But I'm concerned that 5 years from now, could I do that from 5,000 miles away, 500 miles away, 100 miles away? And the answer is yes. So I think we're going to see cyber, which is now always related to making money and stealing information, will somehow turn black and become more of a terrorist tool, more of a tool of harming people.
And I should allow our viewers to know you've spent now about the last 20 years or so working with cyber. My first 20 years was all around counterfeiting of documents, so it was developing security features that went in paper and plastic, passports, driver's licenses. But the last 20 years has all been based on technology. And I had the great benefit of getting to work with some technology companies who, as one CEO said, I play chess with Frank. I tell him, here's what I developed, and he says, well, this is how I defeat that. So I go back and fix it.
Then I say, here, I fixed this. And he goes, well, I'd still get in this way. So I go back and fix that. And the day that Frank says to me, I think this is pretty foolproof for now, then I know I have a product I can bring to the market. And then I use Frank every year to revet it and review it to make sure that we haven't found another way to circumvent it.
I'm almost embarrassed to tell you that in my home, I've got 3 smart speakers, and I can say, Alexa, do this, or Alexa, do that. I know a little bit about big data. I know what my cell phone does with me when I travel around that I'm not acutely aware of. How worried should I be as a consumer with all of these new technologies that come to the market when the backdoor security end of things may not be tested, and I may not know?
They're not tested, and most companies develop a technology like you just spoke about, and basically they don't go to the final point of saying, how would someone misuse this technology? Because they rush it to market to make money. They don't vet the product. So that product, obviously, that we're talking about in your kitchen is voice activated. So a hacker can easily manipulate that.
Is it voice activated, or is it always activated?
It's always activated, but activated by voice to start picking up information. So a hacker can, and has done this, can simply go in and take that and tweak it a little bit so that they hear everything you say. So, you know, we've had cases where a lawyer working on a multi-billion-dollar civil case is saying to his wife personal information about that case, and the other side has manipulated to learn that information from that device. So again, I always encourage companies to stop at that point and ask the simple question, how would someone misuse this before you put it in the marketplace?
But what do you tell consumers today? Many people watching may have a smart speaker. They certainly have a cell phone.
Right.
They have technology. It helps them in their life.
Helps them in their life.
But what do you tell them?
I let them know that their Samsung TV, their remote control, their refrigerator that tells them when they're out of milk, all those are devices that can be hacked into and are hacked into every day. So sometimes we have too much technology. I personally do not need my refrigerator to talk to my toaster. They've been getting along for years without having a conversation.
But based on what you told me, I want to go back and resurrect my dad's 1958 Chevrolet Apache pickup and drive it around.
That's it.
And nothing else. But I want to be progressive too.
You want to be progressive, but you have to ask yourself those questions. So, you know, I have security cameras around my house, but I know that those security cameras are encrypted so that someone can't hack into them and watch what's going on outside. I don't have any in my house, but outside my house. But again, we buy cameras and we don't ask those questions. We install them because we like to look on our iPhone and see what's going on around our house while we're away. But we're not asking the question, who else can look at what's going on around my house, or who can hack into those cameras?
We're in Casper, Wyoming, and earlier today you shared with many listeners from an AARP broadcast tips to protect themselves from credit card scams and other scams that seniors in particular are afraid of and concerned about, yet fall victim to. What is your advice to folks that kind of lived a more compartmentalized life in their home, but their phone rings and they go to their mailbox?
Yes, and scams work because the majority of people are honest, and because they're honest, they don't have a deceptive mind. So when their phone rings and it says that it's the Casper Police Department on the caller ID, they naturally assume it's the Casper Police Department.
It says it right there.
Right there. Okay. So they don't realize that that's easily manipulated. So when they start talking, they believe they're speaking to someone at the police department. What I have found in my career is that scams of all kinds of scams of all nature have 2 significant points, and that's the red flags. And at some point in the scam, they either have to ask you personal information, such as what's your social security number, your date of birth, what's your bank account number, or they're asking you for money. And the money must be paid immediately. You can't mail it to them. You can't come down and give it to them. You have to give them a credit card number or give them your bank account number.
You better do it now.
Those are the 2 red flags in every scam, whether it's a grandparent scam, the sweepstakes scam, the internet scam, it doesn't matter, publishers clearinghouse scam.
All of those. It's awful.
Yeah, so if you remember those 2 things, that helps you a lot in not falling for those scams. When it comes to robocalls, the longer you stay on the phone, the more calls you're going to get because they're timed. So if you hang up immediately, they're not going to keep calling you.
I've thought that I'll waste their time and at least get something out of it and play along, and knowing full well I'll never give them anything, but that's the wrong thing to do.
That's just going to get you more calls. I tell people that I'm not on social media, But if I have 3 sons and 5 grandchildren that are, so I teach them to use it properly. I tell them not to put a straight photograph of themselves on there, like a passport graduation picture, because they can capture that image and use it for identification. There are many softwares that are out there that are facial recognition, PitPat and Find a Face, that I can take your picture and then find your Facebook page and go to your Facebook page.
So what you're telling me, I could be at a restaurant and someone could
take a picture of you.
Take a picture of me.
And then find you on Facebook.
And I'm in Houston, and here we go and have nearly
find you on Facebook.
Everything that I need.
Now, if I go to your Facebook page and you happen to tell me where you were born and your date of birth, that's 98% of me stealing your identity. I really just need to know those 2 things. So I tell people, first of all, if you're going to put a photo on Facebook, it's a photo of you and your dog, you and your friends, you playing a soccer or baseball. And if you're going to put on Facebook, you never put your date of birth or where you were born on Facebook.
Frank, I've heard you say this, and it surprised me. If someone steals my identity, I have a bank account, I have assets. A child's identity, a baby's identity, is even more valuable. And
Absolutely.
I don't understand that. Why is that?
I have been writing for years about children's identity theft. It's only been taken seriously the last couple of years. But I realized early on that if I could steal the identity, say, of a newborn child coming out of the hospital by getting their Social Security number, I can then become that child or sell that information, that number, over and over again for years, because that child is not going to use their Social Security number till they're 17, 18, 19 years old. If I even steal the Social Security number of a 14-year-old, I have 4 or 5 years before that child's going to go seek credit or try to get a loan or use that Social Security number. So criminals have realized the younger the victim, the more valuable that piece of information is. So on the dark web, a newborn or a 14-year-old's identity, it's much more valuable than a 62-year-old man's identity.
This stuff will have happened for 10, 15 years, and no one will have known. And it's almost too late.
I can't tell you how many emails I get from young children who say to me, I graduated from high school this year. I applied to my college for a student loan, and they said you already had the student loan and you defaulted. And I try to tell them that's impossible. I just graduated from high school, but someone had used their Social Security number and their identity.
And have the cash. Frank, we have about 5 minutes left today. Is there a promise in the future of more security? Blockchain technology, we've heard a lot about it. We think that industry is now starting to implement it. Is it going to be some time, though, where that provides a level of protection for something that people don't even understand what it is today?
Yeah, I think blockchain will be great for keeping accurate records for financial purposes, for banks and accounting firms and people like that. I think we're 10 years away from it actually being seen and used around the country. There are social issues. You know, for example, on a witness protection program, I wouldn't be able to do that anymore because you would always know who the person was. Someone changing their sex, the same thing, I'd always know what their sex is. So there are social issues attached to blockchain. But I think the concept of blockchain, the security of blockchain, outweighs all of that. So it's just a matter of studying it, using it, and implementing it in a proper way. So I think it'll be quite a while before we actually see it being used that way. But obviously, if you're the state and you're thinking ahead, then you're thinking about where's blockchain going, and it is obviously eventually going to be a good technology.
Frank, you've worked so hard in the last 45 to 50 years. Have you righted your wrong? Do you feel that have you been able to forgive yourself for the activities that you conducted as a teenager?
I do, but as you know, there's people that always judge you, and they judge you by your past, and you have to live with people judging you all the time. So I still get to, somebody I talk to says, oh, I better watch my wallet, or things of that nature.
You did shortchange Johnny Carson.
Yeah, that's right. Shortchange Johnny Carson. So I think, when you make a mistake in your life, you have to live with it. So I get a lot of emails from young men and women that say to me, what advice can you give a 15-year-old? And I do answer them, and I write back and say, look, people will tell you that life is short, but life is really not short. Life is kind of long. I'm 70. I might live to be 80 if I'm lucky, or 90. Someone from my son's generation might live to be 100. When you make a mistake in life, when you mistreat someone, when you deceive someone, when you cheat on someone, when you lie to someone, that eventually comes back to really become a burden in your life. When you're young and you did it, you think nothing of it. But as you grow older, you start to think about that girl you cheated on, or that relationship you lied in, or something you did that was illegal that hurt somebody, and that starts to become a burden. So I do live with the burden of the things that I did, and even, you know, I could say to myself, well, they were big corporations and banks. I really didn't cheat any individuals. I still did something. So what I try to do in my life is I've turned down 3 pardons from 3 sitting presidents of the United States. I do not believe that a piece of paper can excuse my actions. I believe in the end, I will be judged on my actions. And so I believe in the end, people will judge me based on what did he do with his life in the outside and how his life turned out. And that's the only thing that's important.
Frank, you see so many young people, old people, men and women bolted to their phone, again, using technology. What advice did you or have you given your family, and how did your love for your family really impact then the rest of your life to maybe you don't use a cell phone as much as I think that many people do, and to have those personal interactions that maybe might help folks?
Yeah, and I'm not involved in any social media whatsoever. I personally believe, probably not in my lifetime, but 20 years from now, we will look back at Facebook and Instagram and social media and realize that that was a very bad experiment. Anytime that you start controlling the minds of 2 billion people and the psychology of 2 billion people and what they think and what they read and what they believe, that gets very, very scary, especially when most of it is inaccurate and not correct. So I'm very concerned about how social media has corrupted the minds of a lot of young people and the way we think and the way we act and the way we see the world. So I think that we'll wake up to the fact one day that that was not a good experiment, and we'll see social media out of our lives.
You have, in our last few seconds, a website that people can learn more about protecting themselves from fraud. Tell us how to access that and what's out there for them.
Well, on my website, which is just my name, abagnale.com, I sell no products or provide any services, strictly an educational site. So because of most of my work is dealing with banks and financial institutions and corporations, there's a lot on there about embezzlement, counterfeiting, check forgery, and things that they're worried about. But with AARP, we developed the FraudWatch Network, and I develop videotapes for that. I do a podcast every week out of Washington, D.C. that people can tune into that deals with consumer scams, things that consumers are worried about. And we have a FraudWatch Network hotline that people can call that hotline, or they can just go to fraudwatchnetwork.com and see those videos, learn about all the newest scams. And so I encourage people to be a little proactive. And remember, you can't just rely on the police or the government or the bank to protect you. You have to be a little smarter. You have to be a little wiser than you did 20 years ago. So you need to be a little more proactive about protecting yourself and your assets.
I think that's wonderful advice. Frank, thank you so much for coming to Wyoming.
Thanks for having me.
I
Pleasure
appreciate
being
it.
here.
And thank you for being on Wyoming Chronicle.
Thank you.